Condor. I wonder what that means to you. Could it be this huge bird that ranges over the Andean mountains, perhaps? Or maybe it's a tin of supposedly satisfying pipe tobacco. Or maybe for the railway enthusiasts out there, it conjures up this. What is it? It's a freight train head coat. Which leads me very neatly to today's video, which I'm sneaking in the middle of the month, about a freight train that began in 1959 and ran through until 1965. The forerunner, I suppose, of the Freightliner trains that we know now, because this was a special train, each one consisting of 27 conflats, which could contain a standard British Railways small container or a double-sized one. And this train ran every night from London to Glasgow until 1965. The name itself wasn't derived from any bird or tobacco. It was simply short for container door to door. And Condor Freight Train offered literally a door-to-door service for small businesses. And I think from Glasgow down came the manufactured products, because Glasgow was a centre of industry at the time. And in the opposite direction would go imported goods from the London ports. As I say, there were 27 wagons on each of these trains going each way. Every single one would have a container, whether it had a load or whether it was empty. So there was always a good supply of containers at either end for the customers to use. It seems to have been very successful, obviously, until Richard Beeching had his concept of what we now know as the modern Freightliner train with the large containers. And that really did for it in 1965. However, it was the locos used on it. I'm not sure if they were actually built for that purpose. I've since found out that having been built in 1958, they probably weren't specific for that purpose. And in fairness, they only lasted a couple of years or so on it. But to enthusiasts, they've probably become most associated, more than likely due to Terence Cugnot's famous painting. But they were certainly the most unusual, or one of the most unusual types ever used on British railways. And that's my excuse for an unboxing.
Allow me to introduce yet another of those pilot scheme diesel locomotives that were built for British Railways as part of their modernisation plan to see which would be long-term suitable for the task in hand. And here we have one made by Metropolitan Vickers. And it's one of these unique locomotives yet again because it used Crossley two-stroke engines, similar to what had been successfully used by the Admiralty. However, as we shall find out, they were not particularly successful in British Railway service. They were delivered in 1958, but when everything was fitted in, it was found that the weight over axle was 19.5 tonnes, I think it was. British Rail stipulated 18 tonnes. So what they did in the end, instead of being a Bobo loco like others of the class, they made it uniquely what they called a co-bo. So you had 3 driving axles on one end and 3 driving axles on the other bogie.
You can all see it's 3 on one bogie and only 2 on the other. The things you say when you're recording without a script.
And that spread the weight out to keep it within the limits. Let's have a look, shall we? When they first delivered, they went to the Derby area and were used on St Pancras to Manchester expresses on the Midland region by a matlock. But I've just told you about the Condor. When the Condor was introduced, they were all transferred to work on that particular service. And I think that was when their troubles began, because I always have trouble with this, don't I? Come out, come out, come out. There were problems. They were used mainly in pairs, but it was found out fairly soon that when used singly, especially up north with some of the gradients, they couldn't cope, and severe damage was caused to the corners of the cylinder blocks, or engine blocks, sorry. And what happened was, they all had to be taken out of service. The other problem too was the windows. Now, this particular model, as you can see here, has the flat windows at the front and rear. When they delivered, they had wraparound windows. And because of the vibrations of the loco, they kept falling off. So while they were away, they were all withdrawn in 1961, after really only having done 2 years service, shall we say, on the Condor, replaced by Class 24s. They all went away and were completely refurbished. New electrical equipment, the lot. The electrical equipment actually, as refitted, was very reliable. But they were really not standard. And after refurbishment, they were all sent out to the Barrow and Carlisle area, where they spent their last days working on passenger service. Eventually they'd all gone by 1968, except for one, which is now, having had a variety of roles since withdrawal, it's now at the East Lancashire Railway, hopefully being restored to running order. As you can see, this model, this is a Helljam model, so it's quite heavy. Pretty good. Captures the unique... Why can I never get this right? There we go. It captures the unique front style of the locomotive quite well. But of course, that doesn't interest you, does it? So, let's get it running and see what happens. Why is it going in reverse? I'm discovering about this as it goes round. Because the way this has been set up, and it's been set up much more prototypical than a lot of other models, it takes quite a bit of time before it builds up its speed. So I'm sorry about that. It hasn't been a very successful running in, but I'm going to bring it round once more. Well, I hope that didn't deafen you too much. I'm going to take the sound down obviously when I do the editing. Not the best of videos, I'm afraid, this time. Sometimes these locos go around at such a fast rate you can't do anything with them. This one, as I say, the motor seems to have been designed actually to mirror what would be typical speeds with the wagons attached behind it. It's not a bad looking loco, is it? It's certainly well modelled and reflects the image of the original. Yet another one of those in my collection that I'm going to have to store off site and just bring out when I need. But there you go. I had to have one. Only just now has it been reduced to a price that I was prepared to pay for it, although I did pay the top amount. I'm not sure they're going to be reduced any further, but there you go. So apologies for the fact that it's not the most brilliant of videos, but you've had an opportunity to see an unusual type of loco for British Railways and hear a little bit of the story about them. See you next time.